Thank you very much. I want to use this 7 minutes to try and explain how the business of media is changing and what that might mean for you in trying to get your message out there through the media. To try and show you how much it's changing and, if anything, how the sustainability of the media right now is in real question. The way we use the internet and the way we fund it is essentially hollowed out and is splintering traditional media. And that's making it much harder for you to reach a wide audience in a pretty simple and clear way. Where once, let's say you had a press release or a message, you could give it to a newspaper and it would get out there and a lot of people might read it. And if it was reported accurately, you might get your message across. It was much easier in the old days to do that. Now, fewer people might read that newspaper or radio or television. You may have to go direct or through other methods, and it makes it more difficult. So I just want to explain how that's happened. This is a chart that shows you what's happened to newspaper ad revenues in the United States over the last decade or so. And essentially, they have collapsed from 50 billion to around about 40 billion. So where once advertisers essentially used to subsidize news production, and it meant that people could read a news article and not really have to pay for all of it, that subsidy has been destroyed. So where previously the news media provided a service to the public of challenging authority, of reporting the facts, and of getting some debate going, that debate, that service of the fourth estate was subsidized by advertising. That has gone as advertisers have moved into other media, often online, and as readers have gone online, where they can get what they want for free. So you've seen advertising revenues in the States halve in newspapers. The online advertising revenues have increased, but of course not nearly as much as was lost. So for every dollar of advertising revenue lost in print, at best, 5 to 10 cents was made up in online advertising revenue. That's in the United States. So employee numbers for journalists have dropped between 40 and 50% in the United States in the last decade. It's been less evident here, and it hasn't happened as quickly, but the same thing has happened. So my estimate, between 20 and 30% of newspaper journalists have gone in the last decade in New Zealand. And that is accelerating. And it's not just in newspapers. This is a chart showing how much television, when I say television, traditional, either pay television or free-to-air television, so sit in front of a telly, change the channels, not necessarily connecting to the internet. This is what's happening to viewership of television. So you can see for people like us, I suppose, or like me at least, around the 30, 40, 50 mark, they're still watching television, although dropping a bit. The millennials, the ones we talked about earlier, the ones that you want to reach, they have stopped watching television or dramatically reduced their television watching. And all around the world, television operations, particularly pay TV, but also free-to-air, are now experiencing that cold wind that newspapers have faced over the last decade. And the most high-profile example of that in New Zealand, of course, is the death of Campbell Live under the intense pressure of flat to falling revenues at MediaWorks. The same thing is pretty much happening in New Zealand. So this is a chart you won't actually have seen anywhere else. This is collected from data from the Advertising Standards Authority, which shows how advertising revenues have changed in the various media in New Zealand over the last decade. So television dipped during the global financial crisis, recovered, but is now starting to fall again. If you track that against nominal GDP, the share of nominal GDP going to TV advertising is dropping. You've seen here newspaper advertising has dropped from over 800 million to close to 450 million this year. Online, the green line has increased from not much to more than newspapers last year. Did everyone here know that? That online advertising in New Zealand is more spent online than in newspapers. And almost up in 2014 to where television is. This year, for the first time, online advertising will be greater than any other source of advertising in the country. That is a massive shift. Google and Facebook do not pay for journalists. So why doesn't the internet pay for journalists online? Here's one of the reasons why online advertising won't. So you might have heard me say, for every dollar you lose coming from paper to online, you might get 10 cents. Actually, it's more like 1 cent now. So many of you will be in charge of marketing spend, and you'll be putting your money into Facebook and Google, YouTube, which obviously means Google, and maybe Twitter or the other ones that are around. None of those pay for journalists. And so a lot of readers are going and getting their news online for free, and increasingly now they're using ad blockers, so that even that 1 cent out of the dollar, that is going too. So the ad block numbers have risen quite sharply in the last couple of years to over 200 million people who use ad blockers. Who here in this room uses ad blockers, right? That means all those news articles you're reading, you're not paying for at all. Previously, you weren't paying much at all. So what has this left us with? It means, as we heard before, many news organisations are having to compete harder and harder just to get page impressions. Do clickbait. And what you end up with is sites that become echo chambers. They rewrite press releases, pump in some comment, shout from the treetops, do a Mike Hosking, get people into your site, get that click, get that 1 cent of revenue and move on to the next thing. You cannot afford to do slow journalism of actually understanding a topic, spending time on it and producing one article a week or a month. You have to do 2 or 3 articles a day, preferably with some clickbait headlines. And this is what you end up with. So this is 2 days ago, the top 5 stories on Stuff and NZ Herald, the most read news sites in New Zealand. Stuff actually is amongst the most read websites of all in New Zealand. That's what you get when you rely on advertising, online advertising, to pay for your journalism. So my plea to you is to try and think about what business models might support journalism, if you think that's important. I know there are some people who think, well, we can reach people directly. Actually, a lot of readers want to have that arbiter. They want to have that person who's looking in the middle. And my challenge to you, and the one from Rod actually, was let's find a business model that works. The NBR is doing sterling work with its subscription model and its other ways to do things, but at some point, and here's a question for you, how many of you pay for a news subscription? So there's a few. I hope in future there'll be lots more. Thank you very much.